Welcome to Slouching Towards Masculinity. What does it mean to be a man in today's society? How are we defined and how do we define ourselves? What lessons have we learned and how do we affect others? Join me, Philip Bedwell, and guests as we discuss lifestyles and life lessons as we slouch towards masculinity together. And welcome to Slouching Towards Masculinity with me, Philip Bedwell. And hello once again. So today I'm going to be interviewing Garry Vanderhorne. I've known Garry for far too many years, but it's been wonderful knowing him. Garry has had a very varied life, growing up in East London like myself, venturing into music before discovering wrestling, also going through a Muay Thai and martial arts based background. We discuss all of this, including how he is continuing to run one of the UK's most successful wrestling companies, Lucha, Britannia, but how gender and masculinity features in that as well, and how he encourages and mentors people to be themselves and shy away from stereotypes and really try and break the mold in wrestling and also in their own characters as well. It's an incredible conversation, if I do say so myself, and we only just scratched the surface, so I really want to get Garry on again soon. He has a lot to say and a lot of insightful comments. So once again, I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. If you've got any questions, any sort of comments, please get in touch. And until then, I will see you next week. Thank you. Right, so then, Garry, welcome to Slouching Towards Masculinity. Unlike the last one, I have not forgotten what this show is called today, so that's always a good start. How are you today, mate?
Really good, thanks. Really good to hear your voice.
Good stuff. Well, even though in my quest, ever more trying to sound less like a radio DJ and more just making it sound relaxed and stuff, because I'm quite relaxed. So, we're just, generally going to talk about masculinity, but if the conversation goes elsewhere, I'm sure it will go into wrestling and stuff as well. I'll include that in. So, just let's go where we may. But I mean, to start as a starting point, I was just going to say, obviously, when you were growing up, if you had any sort of masculine role models, or any masculine influences that were sort of come to mind as you're growing up that sort of like shaped you at all?
Yeah, it's one of the things is quite an interesting subject, because I don't think that a lot of guys, especially let's say of our generation, between like mid-30s and mid-40s to 50, people don't really talk about their male role models very much. And I think it's really important to kind of have, especially like nowadays, to have male role models. And when you're a kid, you don't really know what that stuff is. You're watching television, you're reading comics. You may or may not necessarily have a father figure around, or you may be like living in a family situation where you've got, the men at work or no men in the house at all, being brought up by women, which is no bad thing. But sometimes I think the role models come from what you need at that time. So when like young men are hitting their early teens, I think that's when the testosterone starts coming through, puberty starts happening, and changes start happening, and that's where I think that role models become very important.
Exactly, is how you're gonna. Well, one thing that I sort of tend to think about as well is normal in years gone by, in a sort of tribal setting, there would have been a rite of passage, and those rite of passages don't really happen now and haven't happened for a long time in between that sort of adolescence into adulthood. So we now look for role models and rules and settings that we can sort of base ourselves upon, that now sort of give us the idea, okay, well, if I follow that sort of pathway, then I become what I believe to be a man.
Yeah. Well, for me, that was through superheroes and comic books. And to a lesser degree as well when I was young, wrestling from watching the World of Sport Wrestling on ITV on Saturday afternoons.
Sure. I mean, in terms of your like superheroes, any ones in particular leap out at you at all that you were like, that is the one that sort of stuck with you? Or was it just all?
Well, I think Spider-Man probably was the big one because he's the most relatable as a kid and as a young man, because he was a kid and he was still at school, and he lived with his aunt. He was almost an orphan. His parents had died, and then suddenly he gets this great power and doesn't really know what to do with it, and isn't really equipped in the world, and has to find his way through.
That's brilliant. And I think it's something that's sort of come up in a few other conversations as well that's very true for Spider-Man, and what you just said there as well is almost to be a complete man, they have to show vulnerability. So as Spider-Man, he's like super and sort of can deal with anything. But as Peter Parker, he's got that vulnerability of that he doesn't exactly know what he's doing and he's just trying to do the best he can. So it almost lets you into that heroic status a little bit more when you can show that he's incomplete and still sort of undergoing a journey himself.
Yeah, totally. For me, that was much more sort of believable and resonated with me more than a Superman type of character, or even I'm a big fan of the Hulk, but being the Hulk being more of a mindless brute kind of thing. The fact that you have this jeopardy and this kind of moral dilemma and not really knowing where to go and what to do, and just because you do have great power doesn't mean you necessarily know what to do with it.
That's yeah, very, very interesting, and so a pretty good life lesson as well. I mean, like I say, comic books I always think are sort of put out there in broad statements, but then there is always going to be truisms that you can apply to your own life as well, that understanding what you're capable of and understanding that if you do, you can wield great power within your own community, within your own world, and you need to know when to temper that as well.
Yeah, and as well, I grew up in East London in the 70s. Large influx of minority groups. I was brought up in a multiracial, multi-ethnic society and street and community, and like reading the X-Men at that time, and it kind of was a comic book sort of thing of what was happening around me with my friends of being persecuted and not accepted, and racism and violence and stuff like that. So the whole analogy of mutants and that kind of stuff. So I really dug the X-Men as well.
That's an interesting point. So would you say almost with sort of the mutants and sort of like sitting outside of normal society, so to speak, would you say you related to that as well, that you feel that you had this uniqueness that just didn't conform to what society's norm would be, and you sort of found some solace or some sort of similarities between you and these X-Men?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I could really relate to characters like Nightcrawler, for example, or the Beast, where they looked completely different to everybody else and were scared and embarrassed to show themselves, and had to hide and weren't accepted and was hunted down and victimized. That kind of thing gave those comic books an edge of reality and realism for me when I was growing up.
What would you also say, so like we've already sort of spoken about sort of role models and influences that you responded to and you were like, yeah, this is something that fits my worldview and something that I can sort of base myself upon. Was there anything that when you were growing up you avoided, like any sort of masculine archetypes or stereotypes that you were like, no, that's something, or things in your world in growing up in the East End like I did, that you sort of shied away from and went, no, this is something that I don't relate to or I don't want to relate to?
Well, I think you kind of get swept along with things depending on what other members of your family are into and stuff like that. So obviously, football is a big thing. Come from Forest Gate and Upton Park. My granddad was a bus driver at Upton Park Garage, so it's like literally at the back of the West Ham football stadium was the garage. So I grew up around that. West Ham and football was very big with my family, and I went to a game or two and was not into it at all, was not bothered one bit and couldn't see at all what football was all about. I didn't get why everyone was so crazy about football.
Funny, do you know what? That is interesting because I am exactly the same. And if you don't mind, I would like you to sort of pick on that a bit more. What was it for you? Do you think it was what turned you off about it? Was it just the pointlessness of the game, or the mob mentality, just everyone sort of shouting mindlessly, or the drinking, or the hooliganism, or if that was part of it? I mean, what were you thinking? Oh, this just isn't for me. Were you just bored by it, or was there other things as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're not of dissimilar age. I think we're like 8 years apart.
Yeah, I think about that. Yeah.
There would have been some similarities between our experiences of growing up, but because I'm a bit older, it might have been a little bit more, I don't know, a bit more old fashioned. I'm not sure, but that kind of, those, for me, those Saturday afternoons when I was a kid that seemed to go on forever, and they were just filled with inane sports that other people were just going crazy about. The pubs were filled up with people, men smoking and drinking and watching these sports in the pubs. I used to get sent down by my nan to drag my granddad out of the pub for dinner. I'm like 5 in 1977, and it's like go down the end of the road and go and get your granddad and tell him to come home for dinner. And it's like being sent down there, and there's just this massive kerfuffle and like what we'd call today toxic masculism. Masculinity. That was sort of, I just thought, what is going on? And we're like bringing it back round to wrestling again. It was like the wrestling was the only thing as a kid that kind of appealed to me at that time, because that was more like superheroes.
Well, yeah, and I think as well for me it was with wrestling, you'd get like different stories told almost in every match, and there was more of a drama there. You'd have the suffering and the comeback, and sometimes a good guy would be victorious, sometimes they wouldn't. But there was always a heightened drama being played. Where for me, with football, for instance, like I say, a lot of it, I'm almost exactly the same. Like being exposed to sort of like the drinking, and I was never very sure. I didn't like the attitude of people when they were drunk around me and stuff. And I just there was always that sort of latent aggression that you'd get aggression in wrestling, but it was more, I don't know, more theatrical. Whereas in football, it was something nasty, and it was always and it shouldn't have been about violence. It's about these two teams trying to score goals. But I could never see myself in that, and I because of the hooliganism and stuff around the outside of it, I couldn't enter into it. It was just that mob mentality that I just didn't enjoy. I didn't see any interest in the game either.
Yeah, I never really sort of thought about it too hard as to why I wasn't into it. I mean, I've done sports and fitness and martial arts and games all my life. I got 9 coaching awards in various different things. I've got Coca-Cola football school. I can teach football. One of the things that I did was a sports development officer for Tower Hamlets. And I don't mind playing football every now and again and having a kick around. It's not like it's not enjoyable to do it. But as a spectator sport, for me, I don't even know why I don't like it, really. But it could be all of the things that you just said. I just never really thought too hard about it. But it does tend to be a very sort of black and white issue. If you're meeting new people in an adult world and they start talking, what football team do you support? And it's like, well, I don't really. I used to like West Ham because I grew up there, but oh, okay. And then they kind of don't even register that you don't like football, but they still start talking about football. And you're like, I have no idea who you're talking about. I don't know who this person is. I've heard of Garry Lineker. I've you know what I mean? It's like, and then you kind of, they still don't get it, that you don't get it. They still talk about it. And you're like, no, you don't understand. I have no idea of the last 40 years of football. You might as well be talking an alien language, because I have zero interest whatsoever.
I'm exactly the same. And in my old job as a fitness manager, where I used to work, all of the team were completely into football. And, you're thinking being involved in physical fitness, I would be as well. And they would have running jokes with me that the football would be on one of the big tellies in the gym, and they would say stuff to me about the rules of the game, and see how far they could spin one out and see if I would believe it. And they would just killing themselves with laughter because I was like, oh, okay. And they're trying to explain to me, like, coming up with this silly explanation why something's happening on the pitch. And I'm just like, I was sort of almost believing in it because they couldn't believe how little I knew about football. But yeah, like you say, it's like a common bond. And when you meet another man for the first time, it normally is the three things I always get. It's like, what team do you support? What do you do? And what car do you drive? And if you can't answer those three things or show interest in those three things, the conversation normally gets really weird. Like they just try and force the conversation on you.
Yeah. It's a bizarre thing. And I'm married to an American, so I've been to America quite a few times. And of course, Americans, generally speaking, male Americans, are obsessed by baseball and American football.
Yeah.
So you get you get ostracized from those conversations as well, because not only do I not know about it, I'm not from the country. So you've got that whole kind of swathe of men talk that I have no idea about, It's a bizarre thing.
No, it's one that with both you and I aren't into it. So but it's an interesting one to ruminate on. I mean, that's the thing. I think in life, some people can jump higher, can run faster, and some people physiologically are just going to be into football. They understand it, they look at it, and they enjoy it, and they have a positive view of it. Whereas I don't know, it's like not that I had anything particularly negative to happen to me around football, just weren't into it. But I was going to. Sorry, go on.
I'm sure that if there was a World Cup on and Britain was in the final and we were together and it was on, I'm sure that we'd kind of engage in it somehow and be like, oh yeah, we'd get excited, but I wouldn't know who's playing. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't know, how they got there or why. I'd just be into the fact that it was an international competition and just interested to see who was the best.
But I could almost liken that, putting that onto wrestling for a second. You can get a non-wrestling fan and you'll turn on WrestleMania and they may not be, well, maybe not this year's, but another one, but they may not be into the whole thing, but they would certainly stop and look at it for a while because it's more of the heightened spectacle of it. And, when you get to the end of the World Cup and these two teams have gone all the way through this tournament, it's like, I can understand that the stakes at that very end of it and what they're playing for to be the best in the world. It's like when I watch the Olympics quite a lot when they're on. I don't always enjoy all the events, but I understand this is like the top, or it's meant to be the top level of like sporting competition. So for that, even if I'm not particularly into the sport sometimes or the event, I can sort of watch it and be interested in the spectacle of it more than anything else and the highest level athleticism.
Yeah, well, I think you and I are similar in that way because we're this kind of new breed of man that isn't sort of tethered by the old doctrines, and we're able to see things for what they are and decide whether we want to go with the flow or not. And it's no big deal if we don't.
Exactly. Having that confidence in yourself and within yourself that you can feel that, okay, well, this isn't for me, and not being swayed by that mob mentality that, you've got to pretend in yourself that this is something you're into to try and fit in. Because to be scared, I mean, this is the thing, to set yourself apart, to set yourself alone. People have that safety in that tribe, in that tribal atmosphere, and if you're suddenly out of that, you can be sort of ostracized and you're at risk, and people get scared of that.
Yeah.
But one thing I was going to ask though, you mentioned about going into the martial arts and stuff, and that as you were growing up, and I was wondering why that? What interested you in the martial arts? Why did that resonate with you?
I don't know. It's I guess again sort of the knock-on effect of being a small child in the 70s, the Bruce Lee kind of stuff, the rise of Kung Fu, Monkey being on television, just a thing of superheroes need to be able to fight, to be able to save people and protect people, and that's always been a kind of like big thing with me, just trying to be as much of a real life superhero as possible. So, what do superheroes look like? I have to look like that. What do superheroes do? I have to be able to fight like that, that kind of thing, I guess.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. It's sort of like having the superhero body. That is a very sort of big representation of masculinity, that you have to look strong, physically strong, mentally strong. And the martial arts as well, there's a certain level of discipline in that. You have to follow it in a certain way and follow the rules, which plays into masculinity or a masculine ideal quite a lot. And yeah, like you say, the idea, if you learn the martial arts, that you can become a protector. And that's important to your masculinity as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's you say about the discipline as well. It's a really good thing to swerve a kid into doing something that has very fixed, rigid rules. Just even if it's for a short period of time, just so they understand that is a thing. There are things that have fixed, rigid rules, and if you follow the fixed, rigid rules, you can move up through this system.
Yeah. Well, it's also as well. I think it gives you in a time of fluidity and stuff that we agree in that we are in now. It's good that you feel that you can travel each way. But the thing I always got from the martial arts as well, like you say, it gives you a framework, and with a framework you can start to see how you react in certain situations. So and also it's an effort reward thing. You put the effort in, you get a reward, and you start to learn more about yourself by doing this. The art shapes you, and then you shape the art as well. There's not going to be every technique that you're going to be great at, but in learning things you can see how your body adapts and stuff as well, and then ultimately you learn more about yourself as well.
Yeah, it's a journey of self-discovery and self-betterment, but as well, I liken it to being a musician. So nobody just picks up an instrument and suddenly can play freeform jazz like Miles Davis. It doesn't happen. To become a superb musician, you have to follow a framework and a set of rules. And you have to understand those set of rules, and only when you understand them and you've got them and you've nailed them can you then be free to be super creative and then go, and it becomes art and it becomes unique. And it's the same with any fighting sport like that, craft art sort of thing, martial arts, and it becomes a Zen thing in the mind as well, because it's a mind-body betterment.
Yes. This is a really important as well, like the mind-body connection, that one doesn't really work without the other. That it's important that you can't just be purely based in the physical, because then it's almost that barbarian mentality where you're just going to be quite ignorant and just be a brute. But at the same time, you can't just be, it's agreed that you shouldn't just be everything based in the mind, because then if someone wants to take something by force, you've got no way of stopping them. Or also as well, you could have this amazing mind, but if your body is in a terrible situation, that's got to try and transport your mind about. So it can't if you're all sort of broken and withered.
Yeah, and there's that mentality as well, bringing it back to that kind of bullish, prime, masculine kind of drive sense. When you're a young, angry man trying to find out what's going on in the world, you've got a lot of, let's say, potentially negative energy, both physically and mentally, that needs to be channeled. And if it's channeled in the correct areas, it does you a lot of good for the future. If it's channeled incorrectly, that's when things start to go wrong. And most of the time, I would guess, most like young men, teenage boys, they don't channel it correctly.
Yeah, and that's it. Sort of almost like, or something in there. Yeah, exactly. That I'm reticent to say lack of discipline, because it's a tricky word. Because discipline can also have the negative connotations of that. You sort of beat any sort of sense of creativity out of someone. But on the other side of things, if you are just completely left to have no framework, no structure whatsoever, then, and you haven't got any sort of drive to want to be creative or explore, then unfortunately you can get like locked in this state of ignorance where a lot of negativity can be spread throughout yourself and throughout others as well. You're given to this sort of shadow side of yourself, so to speak.
Yeah. And there's that journey as well. You've got different phases of your life where you need to be slightly in one direction for this to happen, to move you on to the next part, which then don't have to be in that direction. You can change direction a little bit, and then you can focus on that for a little bit, and then you think, oh, I've just got a grip on that, and then you change again, and life changes again, and you have to be adaptable to that. And you know, the weird thing with testosterone, as I'm getting older, and you know, men as they get older generally chill out more because the testosterone levels are generally, you know, dropping as you get beyond a certain age. And it's like, with that wisdom of becoming older and not needing to be so aggressive and so wild in a certain area, you get a new skill and a new sort of mental calmness that enables you to help others more if you channel it correctly, I feel.
You actually, you've touched on three different things there, which I've actually made a note while we're going along. Which one should we go to first of all? Let's go this one. So that right, you've got a good physical basis there. You've also done, and I'm professional wrestler for over 25 years myself. I understand how not fake it is and how much damage has been done to my body, and how in actual matches things might as well. I've competed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and honestly, some of the matches I've had, some of the bouts I've had as a professional wrestler were more physical than the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitions I've done that are legit. But on the same side of things, you have done martial arts, legitimate sparring, legitimate competitions. How did you feel that when you went from that to the world of professional wrestling, where you probably experienced as well, it's changed a lot more recently, but one thing that I had, and I'm sure you had as well when you first headed into it, that you get these guys, or, you know, just wrestlers in general, I've seen it with female gendered wrestlers as well, where they are tied up in this thing that they are in a predetermined sport, but at the same time, they feel that they have to still be physically dangerous. You're right there. Yeah, you have to be. Sorry, that was me. You have to be physically dangerous in some way, and that you still have to be legitimate. You still have to be like sort of scared, you know, like scary in some way and dominant in some way, and they still feel that need to have to be proving themselves.
Yeah.
Did you come into contact with that very much, or?
Yeah, well, it's something that we teach as well in pro wrestling. It's much easier to teach somebody, regardless of gender, if they've actually been in a real fight and know what a real fight is and have some skill in real fighting. It's much easier to teach them to be a professional wrestler than it is to teach somebody who has not had any professional fighting training. That's a definite from my experience. But that's not to say that it's an absolute. There has been that kind of like, oh, you've got to be super tough, but you have to be super tough to be a wrestler anyway, because it hurts you all the time. Time you're in damage limitation, and you're preparing your body to be able to take more and more damage to make it look more and more spectacular for the enjoyment of the audience, to make it the best that it can be for that form of entertainment and that form of art. So it don't think that machismo kind of thing has a lot of play in the modern day. It may have done a lot more back when, and it may have needed to be more like that because the wrestling business was different. But now, because we're in a world where people know and understand that it's as a very difficult art form, I think that people go into it now realizing differently that you don't have to pretend to be like some double-R shooter and come from some like long martial art background or stuff, even though sometimes that does help, but you don't need it. You just need to be able to understand your body and want to be able to alter your body and mind and put it on the line.
And I was going to say, so as you were mentioning, as you're coming into this stage of your life now, and you've got this sort of new type of masculine energy where you don't have to be proving your physicality so much. You're becoming a mentor, which is, I think, a very, very important as being part of a complete man, that you can and guide others without fear of being replaced, or fear of that, like you have that sense of self-certainty that you can give knowledge, and that knowledge, it will be taken on in a good way, and also at the same time it's not going to be to your detriment. But how do you encourage other people to develop characters or show themselves? How do you encourage them to develop themselves personally, either masculine or otherwise? Are you finding ways of teaching these lessons now?
I generally try to not use gender at all. Everyone gets treated the same. I think that, I used to say, if you've got 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, then I can teach you to be a wrestler. That is now, it doesn't matter if you've got 1 arm or 1 leg, as long as you've got a head, I can teach you to be a wrestler. It's nothing to do with gender for me at all. And I think that Greg and I, when we started the school, we were the first people possibly in the world, certainly in Europe, to have that attitude that everybody can be good. It doesn't matter. There shouldn't be this I don't know, this invisible pretend kind of boundary. Let's just teach everybody the same and give everybody the same opportunities, and then the ones who are going to get good will get good. And it doesn't matter whether they're male or female, or identify as non-binary, or whatever the gender. And that's why Britain, pound for pound, is producing the best wrestlers in the world right now.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Because I think for me as well, when I see a lot of the wrestlers coming up in England now, they haven't got, a lot of other countries are still entrenched in these stereotypes, or this need to have this certain mold. But of course, that's been going along for so long now, that's become a little bit stagnant. And with the uniqueness of individual wrestlers in the UK, when you've got people watching it, they've got so many more different body types and ways to identify with certain wrestlers. So it gives you gendered profiling and stuff like that. So they've got you've got a much bigger sort of roster that people can identify individually with.
Yeah, it means there's more stories can be told, more opportunities available, and then more people, more fans are more likely to get involved, because they can see someone or something that they identify with, rather than it all being 6'3" steroidal guys.
Yes.
That was the kind of the American sort of thing for many years. It's as much as we talk about the old school British wrestling, there wasn't many World of Sport people that actually were really big guys with really good physiques. That was the British World of Sport wrestling for 30 years had a certain look, which wasn't necessarily a great look, but it did have some great characters. And then the American product kind of took over, and it was a general sort of thing within certain boundaries of a certain look. Nowadays, it's all the different varieties. It's like a box of Quality Street or Rose's chocolates. You've got certain people are like the toffees, certain people are going to like the Brazil nut chocolates with the caramel in the middle. So it's you got to have something for everybody.
What Quality Street or Roses are you, Gary?
I'm a caramel Brazil nut.
I like that one myself. That's quite good. Well, actually,
the purple.
Yeah, no, that is a very good one. So yeah, you sort of covered it a little bit already, but yeah, the thoughts of gender in wrestling. So you've got the Exoticos in Mexico, and we had Adrian Street intergender matches. There are some places that still have very strict stereotypes, and you've covered how they've changed a bit in the UK scene. But going back from when everything was a little bit more broad stroked, how would you see, has it changed for you in your experience with everything becoming a little bit more a little bit more unique, and having a little bit more individualism in between the types of the characters? Because the thing that I always got, so maybe you can explain the Exoticos better than me, but like I say, all right, they had this very visual, very like wow look, but then they weren't they didn't have to be like heels. They didn't have to be like the evil person. The way they made them the good guys as well, or you know, the good characters, baby faces as well, and how they sort of, you have this very sort of, it used to be a very basic stereotype that they would come out like, but now they've become a lot more individual than that as well.
Yeah, the Exoticos are a great thing from originally from Mexico. So they were the flamboyant, wear makeups, wear leotards, more dress in what would traditionally be a woman's attire, and wrestle very camp, and you know, with perhaps with a gay stereotype attached to it. And so you know, you have your male wrestlers, you have your female wrestlers, and you have your Exoticos. The Exotico has always been around in one way, shape, or form since the beginnings of wrestling, because it's a way to tell a story. Whether that Exotico personally is of a certain inclination or not, or whatever, it's irrelevant really to the storytelling, because you want to entertain the crowd and you want to tell the story. So one of the things that way back when we was like trying to get a certain Jimmy Havoc more exposure, someone who's a very good wrestler, someone who was very experienced but wasn't getting the opportunities that we thought that he deserved. It was like, okay, look, we don't have anyone to fill the Exotico role in our show, so let's give you an Exotico role. No one will know it's you. No one would even think that it's you, because it's so far from you as the, you know, the hardcore hero Jimmy Havoc. So we put Jimmy in a mask and a dress and fishnet tights and stuff, and he plays an Exotico role. Several months later, after having amazing matches with everybody, people going, "Who's that? Who's that wrestler? Who's that Transmexico wrestler? He's brilliant. He's brilliant. That's Jimmy Havoc." No way. And then I didn't know Jimmy could wrestle like that. Well, that's the beauty of, you know, switching gimmicks and changing characters, because you get to exercise certain parts of psyche and muscle and entertainment that you can show a different side of yourself. And then from there, Jimmy started getting booked on as himself with his normal gimmick on more and more shows. And then, you know, he becomes Progress champion, and now he's on AEW several years later. So I feel, you know, I've got a lot of love for Jimmy for having the kind of, you know, all right, I'll give it a go. It's not, he isn't really an Exotico, but he did do the gimmick of an Exotico for a little while, and it really helped him out in his career, just to prove to other people that he could wrestle really good, because he wasn't getting the opportunities as himself. So that's a very weird roundabout way of using Exotico. But then when you've got someone like Cassandro from Mexico, the first out gay Mexican wrestler, who was bullied and bullied and bullied. They didn't want him because he was openly gay. They didn't want him in the business, and he was determined to be a wrestler and determined to prove people wrong. He became a tough son of a bitch, and really, really is a fantastic human being and a fantastic wrestler. And he had to claw his way to acceptance in a very machismo world, in a very bigoted world in Mexican wrestling. And now, you know, he's been wrestling for like 30 something years, and he's helped innumerable wrestlers come through. He's helped loads of people at the school, and he's a fantastic ambassador for Lucha Libre and professional wrestling. And he gives TED Talks about his life and about the struggles of being a gay Mexican man, and being like wanting to be, you know, tougher than tough, and being a really good world-class superhero wrestler. And he's done that. So that's like, you know, that's a real Exotico. And then we've had Cassius come to us several years.
Yeah.
You know, one of the most exciting wrestlers. You know, you could put him on any stage, in any situation, in any TV show. Kids are going to like him. Mums are going to like him. Dads are going to like him. Everyone's going to like him. And he's like a giant pink explosion of amazingness. And he's a brick. He's, you know, so that kind of thing. And he's through that, he's now able to help other people with sexuality problems and coming out and being a positive role model and stuff like that. So, wrestling can help him in so many different ways.
It's just amazing. Yeah, that is absolutely amazing, Gary. And sort of going back to Jimmy, I mean, obviously he's not here, so we can't ask him directly, but it would be interesting to know that when you're given that character, because at some point, if you're put in something that you're not necessarily assuming is you, or you don't relate to it, you're either going to fly with that gimmick or you're not. You're either going to identify with it or you're not. And there had to be some part of Jimmy when he finally put it on and was like, actually, you know what? I'm having fun with this. And yeah. I can identify with this. So there's parts of his character that allowed him to open up and explore that side of himself, which was incredible. And I mean, I remember those matches, they were super fun because it's the same body inside the costume, but that body is able to express itself in a completely different way.
Yeah, well, that's what being we're theatrical performers. We're high end, like stunt theatrical performers, and if you're really sure of yourself and you have an inherent confidence in what you can do and you're a good performer, why can't you play that character and do that character and change it up and do different things? I know someone who's got one of the worst American accents you could even who played an American very convincingly, very funny, and very seriously as well. As much as it was funny, it was very serious for several years, and in front of thousands and thousands of people, and got massive reactions from it.
Well, the thing is, I'm always glad because having to be Bradford W. Bush, everyone forgets that I was Ultimate Perversio as well. But with Mr. Fisto, but that is a whole nother conversation for a whole other time. But I mean,
Necrosis, you played Necrosis as well.
God, yeah, bloody hell. That's how, and El Hombre de Monde, but we won't talk about him because he was a jobber. He was one and done on one show. His character didn't really take off very much.
Yeah, well, you got to try these things, and then they don't work.
This is it. But this, you know what I mean? It's like this is what's so lovely about wrestling for me. It's like all of these characters, some of the most fun I've ever had, because you try these things and they're inside you. And this is what I can sort of liken back to gender and masculinity and being so entrenched in it that certain people just set themselves up in life and you can only be this and you're only recognized as this and this is what you are. You're a big strong man that never cries, that always does the right thing and won't put up with any messing about, and you'll drink your beer and watch your football and watch your EastEnders because that's who you are. But then wrestling, for me anyway, give me an access that, coming up from a working class background, a son of a window cleaner and and a cleaner, that suddenly I was like in this completely weird environment where people are fake fighting in their underwear and all these crazy characters, and it was like, oh, I get to do this too. I get to do all these crazy things, and it was completely liberating. And obviously I don't run around in my underwear all day, or when I was doing it, but then suddenly those parts of those characters imprint on you and you realize, oh, that I like that, I'm interested in that. I'm these things come back at you as well.
It's good as well because you're exploring stuff within yourself to try and better yourself as a performer and as a wrestler, but also you're giving to an audience and you're saying, well, is that working? Is that working with the audience? Is that getting the laugh that I want? Is that getting the shock that I want? Is that getting the awe that I want? Is that, and you're always looking for reflection. You're always micromanaging like your performance so that you try and make your next performance better than the one before. You're always trying to tell the story a little bit better, a little bit more intricate. You and I told some stories that, it didn't matter if out of 200 people, only 10 people got it. Those 10 people got it. We done our job. That was brilliant. We did that. We got through to those people and they believed it and they were totally immersed in our little story that we were telling, in our characters and the way that we portrayed it. And that was, that's job done. We've done it. We didn't do that for us. We did that for them.
Yes, exactly. It's just offering parts of yourself, parts of the human experience within a wrestling framework. Does that resonate with people? If it does, they will give you an emotion back. Then you feed off that emotion and give it back to them and they give it back to you. And it's that constant sort of like a wave going in and out of emotion. And if you're getting it right, and if the crowd are with you, then you take each other on a journey. It's not just you entertaining them. If you get it right, the crowd sort of entertains you back as well. It's a very unique performance art that is really hard to define, but it's incredible.
There's if you watch comedy a lot and you see some of the really good comedians, I don't know if you like Jerry Seinfeld or Ricky Gervais or any people, if they're doing their one of their specials and during their delivery at some point they kind of make themselves laugh in telling a bit of a story. It makes you laugh even more, and it makes it more real that they're engaged in their own sort of storytelling, and it makes it more intimate that's happening with the rapport with the crowd. He's done that night after night after night over probably an 18-month period and honed it down to that special. That little laugh might not be the real laugh, but it was the real laugh at one point, and he left it in the show. And that's where the art form comes in, where you do something that'll be like just that we could be communicating with each other while we're having a match, and the audience won't know, but you and I will know, and might make each other laugh while we're doing it. And then that will turn into something that we can use on the next match that then we can bring the audience in on, things like that.
Exactly. And it for me, it's just having that authenticity of self, like whether, like you say, it's just I do watch a lot of stand-up comedy because I find it very similar to wrestling, because it's planned but it's also in the moment and going with how the crowd are going. But yeah, just having that, like, all right, we might be in pants or whatever, I might be a Brad doing a terrible fake American accent, but there is something authentic in that moment that I'm doing, albeit beating up on a good guy or a good person, and they are displaying pain, and that resonates with the audience. They hate me enough and they're scared enough for the good person getting beaten up that they want me to lose. So even if everything we do is, so in finger waggles, fake, it's actually the emotion is authentic. The framework in which we're presenting is authentic, and then people's emotions that they're giving back to us are authentic. So it really does blur that line into what is real and what is fake, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the art form, that knife edge of, I know this is all staged and their characters, but oh my God, did you see what he just done? Oh gee, that looked like it really hurt. Oh. And then you're on that knife edge of believability, suspension of disbelief, and it becomes great art then, hopefully. And, obviously we don't always get it right, but that's because it's art. It keeps evolving.
Exactly. And, I think it's good to be messy. I mean, we're not figure skating. We're not trying to get for that. At the end of the day, I think it's good sometimes paint outside the lines, because sometimes in those mistakes, you truly sort of find yourself, and you find something else out about yourself that that you didn't know before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
and what with wrestling, as I say, it was predominantly male dominated. That's changing for the better. So there's a lot more women involved now. There's a lot more LGBTQ involved, and it's making it, much more accessible to people. There's much more variety going on. There's much more characters and much more stories that can be told because of it. So, the art form is progressing, and it's been a nice time, I think, from the time that we've been involved in wrestling, from when it was like not very good in Britain to being jumping alive with talent and creativity. It's been a nice sort of 20 years, I think.
Yeah, no, there has definitely been a positive progression. I completely agree. So coming away from wrestling a little bit, you've mentioned how your attitude has changed, and how becoming a mentor, and now not feeling the need to have to present yourself so physically, and being in that aggressive testosterone driven mindset. You've become a father. So how would you feel that has changed and developed you as well as a man?
Oh, becoming a father is incredible. It's it is an amazing, life-changing thing that you can't prepare for, and it gets you in ways that it's indescribable. You can't put it into words. You can't read books about it. It's just, you have to experience it, and it does. I think I have a daughter who's 7.5, and she's fantastic. It's just a delight, just an absolute delight. But it does kind of, it kind of does make you a little bit more gentle and a little bit more sort of understanding. And I don't know. It's a strange one.
Again, you're finding out these new things about yourself the whole time. Sorry, I was just shocked into silence there when you said 7.5 years. I just wondered where the time went. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, where's the time gone? Like in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, and it just flies along, doesn't it? So I was going to say, in wrapping up as well, sort of hopes for the future in terms of like men and masculinity. Where would you like to see everything go? What would you like to see in the future? Well, we're in a very sort of tumultuous time at the moment. So yeah, how would you sort of like feel? Where are we going?
Well, there's this sort of thing that this coronavirus has sort of put a big hand on the world, sort of stopped the world spinning a little bit. And up until this happened, there's a lot of social justice warring going on, and a lot of this kind of misgendering stuff, and Twitter people getting really upset, and this thing that I learned about this year about dead naming and all this kind of stuff. There's all these it seemed to be like no matter what you did as a white male in the Western world, someone somewhere is gonna get upset with you for doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing, and it's become like political correctness gone fascist.
Yes.
And it makes no sense with someone like myself who has championed rights in all directions for a long time and put myself on the line for certain minority groups to have a bigger voice and to be treated more equally. And that's kind of somehow that started backfiring on everybody. And it's like you're not allowed to talk about certain things, you're not allowed to say certain things, and it's like there's going to be a backlash against that, and that backlash was starting to happen, especially with with stuff to do with comedy and stuff to do with wrestling, because the power of the internet and the power of one person's voice to lead people that don't know the truth, they will just believe what that one person says regardless, because it's an inflammatory kind of reaction to something which may or may not be bad. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah,
you kind of like this political correctness gone mad, and you can't call, you have a mixed group of people and you can't say this and you can't say that, and you have to watch what it's like. Really, we're the people that's like championing these things. Don't get down on me for for not being up to the second of what's acceptable on Twitter and stuff like that. And Greg and I, Resistance Gallery, London School, Lucha Libre, we've had a couple of issues with trying to champion and help certain things, and then have been tripped up, and then it goes online and someone says something bad about something, and it's like, that's not how it happened. And then several of their friends go, well, we're never going to go there, or they sound disgusting. It's like, hang on, you're not hearing the truth here. You're hearing one knee-jerk snowflake reaction to something that's not entirely the truth. So there is that kind of as a 48-year-old male from East London who's trying to do good, you get a bit kind of like kicked in the balls sometimes by these people who just try to undermine everything that you've been trying to do for years.
Yeah, and it's sort of like finding that balance where people are going to be open to communication with each other rather than being so quick to be offended. I mean, we do need, as a whole, we do need to, partly the reason I started this podcast up, so we just get a greater understanding and people get a chance to listen, because I would say, I think I've mentioned this before on another episode, but you're barely going to meet anyone or watch a film where the director where everything they've done in all their lives is going to be perfect. It's impossible. But we've got this weird ideal that got held up a while ago, and it seemed to start off with politicians, that you couldn't really have done anything in your life that would be disagreeable. And at the moment, like people can go back 10 years and find a tweet you put out and go, oh, this is terrible. How it's like, my mindset probably 10 years ago is completely different to what I was now. I wasn't doing anything crazy, but I was certainly a different person. I'm glad I've changed. I want to have changed. And it's giving people that platform that they can go, you know what? I may have made a mistake, but I'm willing to change. Or I don't understand what you're talking about. Please explain it to me, rather than just trying to feel endangered and shutting people down with no conversation anymore.
Yeah, totally. It's that kind of I'm offended by what you said there. That's offensive, and then shutting you down. It's like, well, you're the Nazi here, not me.
At the end of the day, it's just going to be your censor. It's civil-minded censorship. Before you know it, everyone's going to be frightened of saying anything again because they will offend somebody, and that fear again drives people into their own little bubbles, and then really offensive stuff comes out, or really dangerous stuff comes out, because everyone's so frightened to offend.
Yeah, and with comedy, a lot of what we do with the shows and stuff is comedic as well. The more that this right to offend becomes less and less, comedy becomes less and less. There's no comedy because no one can be the butt of the joke.
Mm-hmm. That's it. So
somebody has to suffer for comedy to work. Somebody has to be offended.
Yeah. It's finding, like I say, finding those levels where if it isn't for you, you have to go, okay, this isn't for me. I liken it to a personality. If I meet someone and we get on really, really well, they may have a couple of different opinions, but I go, look, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. This is why. And we can have a debate about it, and we learn a bit more about each other. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to change my way of thinking, or I'm going to change theirs. But at least we understand in our disagreement. But there are going to be some things on that line where someone's just going to go say something to me, and I'm going to go, whoa, completely can't agree with that. And I'm sorry, I might be able to listen to you in the future, but right now, I'm sorry, that isn't for me. But I'm not going to berate you for it. I'm just going to go, look, I'm going to withdraw from this. If it's only me you're upsetting, then I can confidently say, sorry, this isn't for me, and I'll pull away.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what's happening now with the people in the States that have got their gun vests on and their guns and protesting about having to stay inside because of coronavirus. Yeah, let them protest. They got their right to protest. Let them protest, and they're the ones that are going to die when they catch it. It's natural selection.
The guns aren't going to help there.
Yeah.
Well, Garry, in closing, mate, is there anywhere that you want people to follow you, or anything they can latch onto if they want to see a bit more about you and stuff like that, and Lucha Britannia?
LuchaBritannia.com. That's one T, two N's. Lucha Britannia. That's the show that's been running for 13 years now in London. One of the number one shows to go to. It is funny, it is stupid, it's ridiculous, it's the most fun you can have.
It is incredible. As being a participant and standing watching it, in both ways, it's equally enjoyable.
Yeah. Same here. I'm not involved on the show anymore. I run the show best, and it's just so fun to watch with to see how the characters and the talents interact and stuff. It's a real good thing. And then we run the London School of Lucha Libre, which is now over 10 years old, and we produce the world's quality professional wrestlers. Or if you don't want to necessarily become a professional wrestler, but you just want to get fit and have fun doing it, you can come along to that and get fit.
Amazing. Well, Garry, thanks very much, mate. Listen, there was a few bits I didn't actually get onto today, so I may have to call on you again in the future, but I really appreciate your time today, and I will speak to you soon. All right, mate?
A pleasure. Thanks very much, Phil. It's been really nice talking to you.
Great catch up, mate. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
You have been listening to Slouching Towards Masculinity with me, Philip Bedwell. You can follow me on Instagram at Philip Bedwell, That's 1 L in the Philip and 2 in the Bedwell. Or you can also visit my website at www.philipbedwell.com. Thank you.